The following is an exclusive presentation of Meet the Leaders, only on Optimum. We're your TV, phone, and internet company.
Coming up on Meet the Leaders, Suffolk County Legislator Tom Cilmi talks about land banks, energy drinks, whether they should be banned, and a lot more. Meet the Leaders starts right now. Hi, I'm Pat Halpin, and welcome to Meet the Leaders, the show getting you to the heart of local government right here and right now with Suffolk County Legislator Tom Cilmi from the 10th Legislative District. Legislator Cilmi, it's great to have you back on Meet the Leaders.
Good to be back again.
Now, the 10th District is in the town of Islip, but all the districts are going through a little tweaking or changes as a result of reapportionment. How's your district going to change?
Changes quite a bit, actually, and for those who are in your audience who are watching from Hauppauge, particularly on the Islip side, or Lake Ronkonkoma, they'll have a new legislator, hopefully, after Election Day this year.
Hopefully they will have a new legislator no matter what.
Hopefully it will be me. So the district now extends from Bayshore on the southwest to through Islip and East Islip and Great River, up through Bohemia, pick up some additional areas in Bohemia, up into Lake Ronkonkoma, a couple of districts now in Brookhaven, which I didn't have before. And then it extends all the way to the west and encompasses all of Hauppauge on the Islip side, and includes some of Islandia as well.
So how much of the district has changed as a percentage? It's a wholesale change?
Probably 27%.
Oh, that's significant.
Yeah, I lost a significant portion of northern Islip Hamlet and Islip Terrace.
You know, reapportionment's a very political process.
Yeah.
As we see in Washington and in Albany and elsewhere. Nassau County's going through a pretty difficult reapportionment where legislators are being thrown in each other's districts as a way of reducing the number of Democrats, or when the Democrats had control, reducing the number of Republicans. Was there that type of wholesale changes in Suffolk County with the reapportionment? I mean, you got to balance the districts in terms of having one person, one vote.
I think by and large the changes weren't all that significant. My district was probably one of the more significantly changed districts, as was, I think, Legislator Kennedy's. Legislator Barriga's district changed quite a bit because our districts butt up against one another. So, and the process itself wasn't as political as it may seem to be in Nassau County. Certainly all sitting legislators were not districted out of, drawn out of their districts.
Or districted into each other's districts.
Or districted into each other. So it certainly could have been a lot worse from my perspective. I always look at the bright side. And so I'm looking forward to meeting some new people in Hauppauge and Lake Ronkonkoma. And I would encourage everybody to go to my website, tomcilmi.com, and they can connect with me through Facebook there or through Twitter. Very accessible. I'm boastful in saying that I'm probably one of the more personally accessible elected officials we have here. I enjoy doing that, and so I look forward to talking with you.
Yeah, you got to be meeting a lot of new people, and you will see what happens. Well, look, you can't be talking about. I can't have you in here talking about county issues without getting down to the meat and potatoes, and that's the the county budget. Last time you were here, we talked some about last year's budget and some of the issues with that. A lot of positions that were only funded for part of the year, and how do you manage through a tough economy? This year, the county executive, just announced that if certain things don't happen, we could be looking at a deficit of $250 million, $250 million. What's your assessment of that?
I think the county executive should be commended for his honesty. I think that we have tremendous fiscal problems. I will never argue that point. We had some debate as to the magnitude of the problems. At first they were $400 million, then they were $500 million, then they were $300 million. So there were some significant differences, but we both agree that there are tremendous problems. And so the question that we're faced with now in looking forward to 2014 is how are we going to deal with those problems? And as you know, as a former county executive, lots of this stems from areas that we don't have lots of control over. So it becomes even more difficult because we're trying to play on the edges and we're trying to find huge savings in areas where there just aren't huge savings to be had.
Right. You know, that's an interesting point. I'm smiling because I'm thinking that when I was county executive, I probably did about 300 forums, and I would start off by saying, what we're about to talk about is, is the county budget. And at that time, it was just under $1 billion. Now it's over $2 billion. I said, but so much of this is set by other levels of government, and we're kind of a conduit for those dollars. But let's talk about the areas where where legislators and the county executive, do have some authority. The county executive says, look, we've got to, and county executives before Bellone have said, we're putting a lot of good money into this nursing home, and it could be better run by the private sector. And a majority of the legislature approved the sale of that, but it's tied up in court. So what are the fiscal implications of that for the county?
Well, they're significant. The county executive says that we're losing about $1 million a month on the facility. The loss, certainly, of the $23 million of revenue from the sale hurts. Yes, the legislature approved the sale twice, and twice now it seems like it's not getting done. So I don't know I mean, I know what the issues are, but from the legislature's point of view, we've done what we've been asked to do. We've made the difficult decisions. And now getting the thing done seems to be the problem again. We had a problem with the Brookhaven Zoning Board, as you know, which was interesting. And we had a problem with New York State. And it's interesting, New York State said initially they didn't approve the sale of the facility, but now it seems that they've approved the closure of the facility, which doesn't make any sense at all.
I was going to ask you about that. Obviously, I follow this thing because 25 years ago I had proposed selling it and having the private sector do it. But that said, I said to myself, where's New York State's being kind of schizophrenic on this? The panel that's responsible for deciding whether or not the new operator has the qualifications to operate this facility. Said, well, you shouldn't be closing it. That and then they turn around and say, but you shouldn't be transferring the ownership. But you can close it. What do you think is behind that?
I have no idea. You look at these decisions and you have to scratch your head and wonder what in the world is going on. On the one hand, you have an option that allows residents, 200 or so residents, to remain in their home, where they've been for years and where they will be for years, where you have 160 or 70 employees that will keep their jobs, and you say no to that option. But you say yes to sending 170 employees to the unemployment line and displacing all 200 residents. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yes.
So I stand with.
This is what the public says when they say, "Hey, can't these people get their act together?" When I say these people, state government, county government, whatever.
And the public is right. This is just ludicrous. And to be fair, I initially supported the sale of the nursing home. I still support the sale of the nursing home. I voted against the resolution to sell it this previous time because I didn't like the details of the resolution itself. But once it was passed, it's done. God bless you. Anything I can do to help, Mr. County Executive, I'm happy to help.
Okay. That's refreshing, by the way. Most people want to keep fighting the last fight. It's time to move on because with a $250 million deficit, you've got a lot of work ahead of you. And this one should be a box that's checked off and you can focus on other things.
And it's important to note that the legislature in this case is not standing in the way. There are two legislators particularly who feel very strongly that this facility should remain a public facility, and they'll fight to the death, I'm sure.
And they launched a lawsuit which I guess in this day and age shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. Okay, we have to take a short break. We're going to have more with Suffolk legislator Tom Cilmi when we come back.
Did you get a call from the coach about those kids who were caught drinking?
Not our guys. They know better.
Yeah, they know better.
Heads up, sport.
Real kids are curious about alcohol. 40% tried by the 8th grade. Talk early, talk often, get others involved.
My grandfather was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia. He'd always say, "How are you and those two long-legged boys doing?" And he fought really hard for 5 months. And he's got the best seat now.
No matter who you are and what you do, cancer is something that we don't have a cure for yet.
Having that hit so close to home for all of us just makes you want to get more involved.
LLS-funded research has been a gateway to help all types of cancer patients live longer and better lives.
Visit lls.org to give.
Ladies, I'm here with Tom Cilmi, Suffolk County Legislator from the 10th Legislative District, now in the town of Islip, but it will expand some to the town of Brookhaven.
Yes.
With reapportionment and the next election. You know, it seems that counties, and in all fairness to Suffolk County, you're not alone in terms of having fiscal problems. Right. For the reasons that you alluded to. You've got pension costs that are beyond your control. The county has its own health care plans, but even with that, the tweaks, health care costs continue to go up. You've got social service costs expanding, right. Primary responsibilities, public safety. But you've been saying something that I think is really important that, frankly, in my opinion, should be a mandate, and I know we don't like that word, for every government in New York State, which is a multi-year budget and plan.
Well,
why do you think that's so important?
I appreciate your support. Listen, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right? So we're talking about issues that are not, you know, one shots take care of a single year budget. But as we've heard over and over again, the county and governments throughout the country really are experiencing what's called structural deficits in their budgets. And so when you have a structural deficit, those are things that you can't fix in a matter of a year. You have to make fundamental changes to the way you govern. And when you do that, you have to plan for it. So I've introduced a resolution that would require the county executive to propose to us when he proposes his budget in September a 3-year plan on roughly, you know, approximately what we expect the financial challenges to be for the next 3 years, what we expect our sales tax revenue, et cetera, to be, and then some alternatives in terms of how we're going to deal with those problems. You know, because a lot of these things you have to set into motion now. I don't want to be told 2 years from now our budget deficit is $200 million or $300 million if there's something we could have done today to avoid that. So why not plan? And yet there seems to be this apprehension to doing so. Part of the reason for that, I think, is fear. There's a fear that politics is going to get in the way of actually getting things done. All of the constituencies that may be affected by these problems, the employees, the contract agencies, et cetera, they'll all start jumping up and down and screaming and worrying about all these things. And then there's also the fear of the bonding, the rating agencies, that they're going to look at our fiscal problems and say, you know, Suffolk's got some problems. Right. We better lower their bond rating. So my opinion, though, is it's about time we're honest with people and tell them what the real problems are, the magnitude of those problems, and let's deal with them together rather than in a closed-door situation.
Well, I agree with you completely, and actually, I understand those fears, but from the standpoint of the executive and the legislature, having gone through a bad period where you had a down economy and revenues were declining, expenses were going up, my view was that the decisions you make, the legislature and the executive, have multi-year implications. Right. So let's lay them out. county executive presents a contract for the cops. It goes for a number of years. Let's show what those obligations are going to be year after year. That's a pretty straightforward calculation. Same is true for every other bargaining unit. You know, what are the implications of the borrowing for capital projects? You have a multi-year capital plan. Why not have that for the operating plan? So I actually think that type of sunlight on this would create a stronger financial picture, because at least legislators, and for that matter executives, would be honest with themselves about the decisions, you know, that they're making. And in the end, those are the two groups that have to work together on this.
Honest with ourselves.
So, by the way, I'll come and speak at your hearing if you invite me.
I look forward to that, and I would invite you.
But I think it's critically important, and I admire you for doing that. And we shouldn't be worried, because transparency is something that could strengthen the county, and the county should have stronger budget practices. And a big part of it has to do with exactly what you're talking about. But getting back to that, I mean, that cuts both ways. So let's just talk about it. You've gone through how many budgets now as a member of the county legislature?
3 budgets.
3 budgets. And you know, the county legislature puts together these omnibus budgets and all of that. And county executives, going back to me, have complained about them because there isn't that much transparency with that omnibus budget. Typically, it's hammered out behind closed doors, presented to the legislature. Legislators are involved in elements of it, from what I recall, and I suspect it hasn't changed that much. But there needs, but that type of transparency needs to occur as well on the work that the legislature does, doesn't it? So how would your bill cover that?
This particular bill that we just talked about doesn't cover that at all, but I do have 3 other bills, now that you mention it, which I like to refer to as Taxpayer Awareness Act 1, 2, and 3, one of which would require us to vote on the budget, which, as you know, creates the tax levy, how much people are taxed in Suffolk County. It would require that vote to happen no later than the day before Election Day. Presently, as you know, it happens the day after Election Day, which I believe is fundamentally dishonest. The second bill would require that budget amendments are laid on the table or presented to the public and to legislators no more than 5 days prior to, or no less than 5 days prior to the actual vote. This way we all get an opportunity to read the budget amendments, see what the impacts are going to be. The public who is going to be impacted will get a chance to speak to the issues. And the third bill basically says that the whole process should take place in public. And right now, the presiding officer assembles 9 legislators. They put them in a basement room in the legislature. They form what's called a working group, and they create this omnibus budget, which is an everything but the kitchen sink budget amendment. Sometimes can account for 1,000 line items in the county executive's budget, as you know. And we are presented with that budget a day or 2 tops prior to the vote. It's not right.
So even the legislators who aren't perhaps privy to that working group's details are in the dark. And look, my advice for you is go forward with those proposals. I also think that as legislators are doing this omnibus, if that's going to be the practice that continues, part of the requirement should be you got to also lay out what the multi-year impacts of those changes are, and it seems to me that would be consistent and strengthen the budget process for everybody. So I really do admire you for digging into that, because it's the kind of thing that frankly most people don't care about, because all they want to do is talk about whether they've raised your taxes or not. But the decisions that are made at budget time, like John Kennedy once said, the power of the budget is the power to choose, are important choices that the legislature and the executive make. Okay, we're going to take a short break. Meet the Leaders will be back in just a moment, so stay with us.
Terry Farrell Firefighters Fund doesn't have a telethon. It's not about being in the spotlight. It's about giving support to the firefighters who serve our communities. The fund was established in memory of Terry Farrell, a decorated member of Rescue 4 FDNY, who perished on 9/11. The fund ensures that firefighters and first responders have the resources they need to protect the public. And the fund assists families of firefighters faced with medical emergencies. Won't you help? Please visit terryfund.org.
Did you get a call from the coach about those kids who were caught drinking?
Not our guys. They know better.
Yeah, they know better.
Heads up, sport.
Real kids are curious about alcohol. 40% tried by the 8th grade. Talk early, talk often, get others involved.
Yes, ready, ready. Go get it.
Oh, come on, Randy. Animal shelter, here I come. And no, I'm not crazy or emotionally damaged. That's a stereotype. I just belong to a total loser. I'm a good dog. So if you want a pet, adopt. And if you see Randy, tell him he dropped his wallet.
I'm talking to Legislator Tom Cilmi from Suffolk County. And Tom, you've been very concerned about the fact that we have a lot of so-called brownfields, dormant lands that have been polluted, sitting there, and they could be put back on the tax roll. You have a plan to do that. Tell us about that.
Yes, actually, I've worked in a bipartisan fashion with the county executive and with my colleague, Legislator Dwayne Gregory, from the other side of the aisle, to apply to New York State for what's called land bank status. The issue of brownfields has been vexing government for a very, very long time, as you know. What happens is you have a piece of property with an owner. The owner, for whatever reason, decides that he's leaving town, business went under or whatever the case may be, and maybe that person owned a gas station or a junkyard or something like that. So there's potentially contamination on the property. The owner leaves. Normally, if somebody stops paying their taxes, the county would, of course, take the deed to the property. But in these cases, in the brownfield cases, and there's about 120 of them or so in Suffolk County, we don't take the deed to the property because we're scared of the environmental implications.
Why would the county be scared of that?
Well, because sometimes cleanups can be very, very costly.
Oh, okay, so the county then takes on the responsibility
exactly.
as the owner.
That's exactly right. So, and there's a part of the Suffolk County Tax Act, which is a New York State law which we're governed by, says that we cannot sell a piece of property for less than the accumulated back taxes, interest, and penalties. So what happens in some of these cases is that you have property values that are not as much as the accumulated back taxes and interest and penalties. So even if we were to take one of these properties, for example, we couldn't sell it again because we would never recuperate the back taxes.
Right.
What the land bank allows us to do is to transfer the property, basically, to this not-for-profit corporation. The not-for-profit corporation is not subject to the Suffolk County Tax Act. So the not-for-profit corporation can now sell the property for less than the accumulated back taxes if necessary, make sure the property's cleaned up, put some covenants on the sale so that we get what we want to get. Either maybe it's a small housing project or a park or whatever the case may be. But we put the property back on the tax rolls, we get the environment cleaned up, and we remove blights from communities. So it's a win for the environment, it's a win for the taxpayers, and it's a win for communities. And we were finally approved by New York State for this land bank, and we expect to transfer our first properties by September of this year.
That's a big deal.
Very excited.
Where are some of these properties located? Are there some that people drive by every day that they don't realize fall in that category of a...
Anytime you see a closed down gas station or something like that, and they're all over the county. There's one in particular in my district that used to be a junkyard that I've been trying to deal with.
And I know there's some up in Brentwood. Some of these were old industrial sites where they did perhaps some manufacturing for the defense industry, and back in the day they just dumped the pollutants in the ground.
And there are cases where the contamination rises to the level of federal oversight or state oversight, but on these smaller pieces of property, usually they don't rise to that level. And funding from New York State and from the federal government has really dried up in terms of trying to remediate some of the environmental problems. So this is a really creative way of dealing with this problem.
So how quickly will once this land bank is established and you have this not-for-profit entity that takes title, how quickly could a piece of property that doesn't have serious environmental problems, but they do have these expenses, move from being this dormant brownfield to potentially being redeveloped?
Potentially very quickly. The legislation requires that the legislature approves the transfer of the properties to the not-for-profit corporation. So there is at least one legislative cycle that would be involved. And then what has to happen is that the land bank goes and finds an owner.
Oh, that's great.
So it could happen very, very quickly.
That's great. Well, I'm happy to see that you're focusing on that. Again, that'll bring some revenue to the county that's desperately needed, but more importantly, it's going to put this property back on the tax roll.
You know, it's the second major initiative. When I first ran for office in 2009, one thing that I wanted to do was get the permit process a little more effective and efficient for our businesses particularly, so that we could create jobs more effectively and quickly. And working with the county executive at that time, Steve Levy, and continuing that work with our new county executive, Steve Ballone, we've been able to put an automated permit process in place where people can apply online for their permits. This was the second major initiative that I undertook, and I'm really happy to say that it's getting done.
Good for you. The county legislature, the last legislative session passed a law restricting access to these energy drinks.
Right.
Got a lot of publicity.
Right.
What are your thoughts about that?
You know, I think people have concerns that these energy drinks are harming our kids, and the misuse of these energy drinks no doubt is contributing to some health problems with our children. A lot of times they mix them with alcohol, and they're drinking 3 or 4 at a time, and that kind of excess is not good for anybody with anything.
Right.
If I ate a 24-ounce steak every night, that wouldn't be good for me either. So the laws that were passed, basically, one of them restricts the direct mail marketing and the distribution of free samples to those under 18. There was a fairly good argument for that, and I voted for that law. The second law prohibits the sale of these drinks to those under 18 at county facilities. I voted against that. There's a restraint of trade issue there that really concerns me, and the underlying principles behind all of this concern me a little bit as well, which I can talk about. But the third law basically requires that county legislators preside over contests to be held in high schools, so that high school kids would create educational campaigns on why energy drinks are bad. I like education. I think the education is important. I just don't think the legislature should be involved in running those sorts of contests. We have other things to do, as we've discussed, for the rest of the
Well,
season.
yeah, look, public education is important. I was watching it, and look, there aren't that many county parks where you've got big restaurants or anything like that, so the use of this will have very limited impact in terms of commerce. But at the end of the day, basically the legislature, in my opinion, is substituting its wisdom for the Federal Food and Drug Administration.
Yes.
And that's their job to protect our food supply.
And it seems to be a lot of misinformation about these drinks. The amount of caffeine, for example, in a Starbucks coffee far exceeds the amount of caffeine in a Red Bull. So,
where do you draw the line?
Where do you draw the line? That's the question that we deal with all the time.
We'll leave that to the Federal Food and Drug Administration. It sounds like it's still going to be an issue for them. Okay. Tom Cilmi, thanks so much for being here with us.
My pleasure
we
again.
Really appreciate it. And that's going to do it for this edition of MTL. I'm Pat Halpin, once again helping you meet the leaders.
Building Homes for Heroes is a Long Island-based nonprofit organization that builds homes for severely wounded military veterans in dire need. At Building Homes for Heroes, we're not just building houses, we're building possibilities and restoring hope for veterans and their families. Please help our wounded veterans as they begin their struggle with post-war life. For information on how you can help, visit buildinghomesforheroes.org.